Check 1, 2.
I got that.
I promise you I didn't say that. I very specifically just gave email attention.
Oh, those are
We're trying to categorize them as a little.
Okay.
They're offered today. This is for speaking at the end. My white ones are for somebody to
Okay. You know, I'll just ask him. I've got the candy.
Then you bring them up at the end, and I'll say, "Hey, ask the question that's going on."
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is so interesting. I don't want to ad-lib too much here, but my name is Bob McBride, Superintendent of Lockport Township High School District 205. And on behalf of our Board of Education, we have municipal agreements with all sorts of municipal organizations, your public bodies, townships, cities, fire, police, you know, other public bodies like our school board that permit us to kind of have events like this here. And it's important to us in the community that you have a comfortable place to sit, that it's spacious for enough people, that you have good sound. And so when the city said, hey, we think this is going to be a little bit bigger meeting than City Hall or the Porter Room, we were happy to kind of fulfill our public responsibility. This is your township high school, and make this space a comfortable space for everybody. We don't represent a particular point of view. I'll kind of mention a little bit what I'm doing here and the role that I have here in just a moment without taking up too much of your time, because as my wife often reminds me when I'm leaving the house, she'll say, just remember, nobody's getting in their car hoping to hear what the superintendent just had to say. Okay, so I'm totally conscious of that, all right? I do want to acknowledge, as always, we have Board of Education members here, so I want to acknowledge they're, in one case, not an elected official, but in the other case, they are elected officials. They're doing it as community service. So we've got Mrs. Tammy Hayes right here, school board member. I just saw Mrs. Wendy Strite right here, school board member. And we have student school board member, Mr. James Wyatt right here, who's a student who serves on our school board. I hope I'm not leaving out any of our other school board members, so on behalf of our president, Dr. Veronica Shaw, welcome. Really, three things before I turn it over to the mayor. I just want to share three very important things, and I you know, as a almost 40-year public school professional, I can't help myself. So if you'll indulge me, and just share three things that are so important to us in a school setting. The first is our primary mission, and that is learning. Every single day when our students come here, we hope that they are learning. We hope they're experiencing a comprehensive public education. We hope they're learning a diverse set of ideas and facts and histories and things, mathematics and reading. We do that every single day. Learning is what we put at the forefront. One of our Japanese teachers is here, and learning Japanese because it opens up the world to you, to how another culture thinks and how another culture relates with their world. So learning, very important to us. The second thing is, any of you who have stewarded teenage children, there might be some teenagers here like Mr. James Wyatt. We are also working with people on being their best versions of themselves, because we know if you're going to learn, you have to be gracious in doing that. You have to have grace, you have to listen, you have to engage with people who have some knowledge. We know that that's absolutely important, but also part of that grace is having voice. So tonight, I'll describe my role just briefly. I'm the moderator, so one of my jobs tonight is to have some questions prepared for the panel, who the mayor is going to introduce, but also have some questions from you, because your questions are important. That's your voice, to have these panelists respond to those. And my job tonight as the moderator is to make sure that those questions get answered. And I'll do my school teacher best with that. And then there is a third thing that's really important to us, and it's important to you as a school, that whenever we gather in a public space, please stand, if you are able, to recite the Pledge of Allegiance for our great country. The flag is right over here to and obviously salute if you're a veteran, if you're inclined. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks so much. I want to turn it over to Mayor Steve Streit.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Does microphone?
It should be.
Can you guys hear me through this one? Oh, yeah. All right, very good. Thank you. Look, I want to thank everybody for coming out here, and I appreciate actually meeting together as humans, right, face to face, and it's good to be able to see you. So thank you for being able to actually take the time and do kind of like a civic duty thing where we actually come together. I appreciate that. Before we really get into our panel discussion, though, I felt the need to kind of talk about something that's important. And one of them is that I want to address kind of the frustration and even kind of the anger that surrounds the compute industry, which data centers are the backbone infrastructure for that, because we understand it. And I want you to know that the council has the same frustrations that we face with all of it. And not in a patronizing way, but we get it. And I can kind of sum up the 5 big ones like this. It's like, what are our concerns? Our concerns are power and how it's stressing the grid. Our concerns are about water and water quality and what that means. There's environmental impacts. I probably live closer to this piece of property than most of you, right? So environmental impacts are important to us. A fourth thing that gives a lot of anger and frustration is just the AI compute industry in of itself. What does it actually mean? What is it? We hear all kinds of things. Is it taking our jobs? Is it like transforming how we live as humans? Is it surveillance, data centers? What are these things? And there's a lot of anxiety around it because we don't actually feel like we have an understanding of it, and it's moving very fast. Which leads to the 5th problem, which is we've watched this industry just kind of roll across the nation and just get approved, one after another. We watch it go to municipalities, we watch it go before city councils, and people come in and they voice their concerns, they voice their fears, they voice their anger, and yet somehow they get passed and they get built. And that's very frustrating because we all feel like, well, where's our voice in this? Doesn't anybody hearing us? How does this happen when we're all very clear about what we are worried about? And so what I want you to understand here with this, and maybe I will be able to help illuminate you a little bit, is what we're trying to do here is the exact opposite of that. We call this as a council together, we called ourselves together as a community so that we can not do that same pattern. And we wanted to transform it and do something different. In fact, sorry, let me get my button feeder here. So understand, like, the way development works, before anything ever gets approved, it works like this. Oftentimes we have, up on the top corner, we have master plans. Usually master plans are things that we have a vision for, like how the city's going to look. Oftentimes it's for other people's properties, like, oh, we'd like to see the 171st corridor look like this and so forth. But the Star Innovation District Master Plan, which we came up with as a community 5 years ago, was a vision for our property that we bought as a city, as a community. And so oftentimes they start there. But really, development goes through these circles on the bottom. And I'm sorry, they're not that easy to see. I apologize. But basically, it works like this. When a developer and a property owner has a project they want to come to us with, they'll go to the Planning and Zoning Committee, and they'll present their project. And the Planning and Zoning Committee sees it fit or makes changes, then it goes to a committee of the whole meeting minute. And then from there, it goes to a city council. And if it gets approved, then staff gets to work and goes through all the process and then goes all the way back to the beginning the next time it comes through for preliminaries and finals. So it's kind of a long process. I want you to understand that in that process, we are where that yellow bar is. There is no proposal on the table. I can't even tell you what this data center would look like because we're not there yet. I don't have plans, I don't have a proposal, there's nothing. There's just an idea. And it was at that point that we wanted to come to you. And so despite what you may have heard, that's where we are. Now I know there's some concerns about, like, well, there's an LOI. Wasn't there an LOI? Isn't that like some kind of secret deal? Let me try to explain what the LOI is. So since we've bought this property 5 years ago, people come to us all the time. Because what happened was, like, let me go back one slide. Again, I apologize, I don't know how well you can see these things, but these were some of the results of the Star Innovation District Master Plan that we put together as a community through workshops just like this. And we kind of went through a process of what people would like to see. Remember, it used to be an old oil refinery, and so people were very cognizant that, an industrial use was fine. And so often what we did was we came up with all these different circles based on community input, and yes, data centers was one of them. Because 5 years ago, data centers were just kind of thought to be what they always were. I mean, they've been building data centers for 30 years. It's like, okay, these are kind of co-op server spaces where, Netflix is stored and our cat videos. And so they seem to be very passive when our committee that was made up of citizens just like you said yes to them. So since that time, based off of this document, we've had many people come to us. We've had soybean processing plants. We've had, hydrogen power, people trying to find ways to convert, aluminum cans into hydrogen power. I've had PsiQuantum, you remember that came up a little while back. We've even had data centers come to us before. It's not the first time. The difference, though, with this one, which wasn't different at first, a company called VME, which is not even a developer. I've been calling them a developer, but they're actually a broker. They're a broker that came to us and said, hey, listen, we want to explore doing a data center on this property. We know it's an acceptable use according to the master plan, and so we'd like to pursue it. And the councils, and they wanted to be the exclusive kind of broker for that. And we, as a council, said, that's fine. We know it's an accepted use, but we'll give you 8 months. If you want to do your due diligence for 8 months, we will agree to not to sell the property to anybody. We'll hold on to it for 8 months. And that was what the LOI was. That's it. Let them do their due diligence. Anybody who sold a house and works with a real estate broker, it's kind of very similar. There was no deal. There was no acceptance of this. In fact, the whole LOI expires July 1st, which means by the time we're done with these workshops on June 25th, we wouldn't even have time to go into an actual development deal. So I want you to understand that we are so far in front of this because we don't want to be what we've seen happen across the country, where it just goes right to planning and zoning and right through the process. We wanted to come back to the community, just like we did the first time when we bought this property. Now, one thing that happened a few weeks ago, though, that was different from all the other people that have come to us in the last 5 years, is VME said, hey, listen, we think we can actually do this. We would like to go into an actual deal. We want to enter into that development process with you. And the council, we said, well, not yet. We're going to go back through these workshops and we're going to have this discussion with our community first, because we too have those concerns. Those top 5 concerns are ours as well. Now, some people have said to me, like, well, you know what, man, this should just be a hard no. We shouldn't even have this conversation. This is just ridiculous. These are all kind of problems. And so let me say why, respectfully, I disagree with that. And hear me out. Hear me out. So I don't know how long everybody's lived here. A lot of information people have emailed me about have said, I moved here a few years ago and I love the downtown, I love our town, and we agree. 14 years ago, when I started this job, and a lot of the council members here today with us also started with me, this is what our downtown looked like. There were burned out buildings, it was boarded up, it was kind of given up hope. People for years had tried to redevelop it, but with really or little hope. And our city council was just kind of, all we did was bicker, all they did was fight. They positioned themselves, they did news conferences to try to undermine other people. That's all they ever did. So that was the situation when we took over. Now, when we started this project, the way we turned the downtown from this into what we see today didn't just happen. It happened because we worked together. And the impetus of it was actually a crisis. And the crisis which led to this was IDOT. IDOT had come to us and they said, hey, listen, we're going to take away your on-street parking because we're going to put turn lanes along State Street. Now, as a community, we're like, dude, you can't take away our on-street parking, man. That'll be a disaster. We're trying to rebuild the downtown. We actually have other master plans that say, hey, we want a walkable downtown with streetscape. If you guys get rid of our on-street parking, it's just going to be nothing but a thoroughfare with trucks 15 inches from the sidewalk. We might as well just throw in the towel if you guys do that. And you know what? We could have went to Springfield, and we could have went with our pitchforks and our torches, and we could have said, over our dead bodies, you're going to take our parking. That's not the kind of town we want to be. And maybe we would have prevailed. Maybe IDOT would have said, okay, all right, that's fine. We won't do it. Probably not, but maybe. But I can tell you, if we did prevail and we kept our on-street parking and told IDOT to buzz off, our downtown would still look like that. Because what we did was, instead of just having a reactionary response, we took a measured, thoughtful response. And we said, okay, let us do our research. And we brought in some experts and we said, look, how can we leverage this moment? Is there a way to make this work? And they said, well, listen, if you take a foot off your sidewalks and you make your lanes, minimum size, you can actually have a turn lane and keep your on-street parking. So we went back to IDOT and we said, look, this is what can we do this? This works. We've hired engineers, we've hired experts to look at this. And they said, okay, we'll do that. And then the next thing we said to them was, hey, listen, while you guys have the whole street torn up, do you mind if we jump in and replace our water mains? They are 100 years old and they're falling apart. And so they said, sure, we're going to have the streets torn up. And so we were able to do a project that councils for a few turnovers had been trying to do, but there was no money to do it. But with IDOT taking all of the excavation and doing all that piece, we could actually go in and replace those water mains. Some of the reason these buildings were burned out is because we didn't have enough fire pressure. But now we were able to put modern-sized fire mains in. And the other thing, too, we said to IDOT while this was going on is we said, hey, you know what? Instead of you guys just putting flat sidewalks back, can we pay the difference and put in that streetscape that we've been planning and talking about for, decades, but never able to actually happen? And IDOT said, sure, that's fine. And so for a fraction of the cost, we were able to start and prime this pump to turn it. And it wasn't just because we said, hell no, it's because how can we leverage this to make it work? And it was important, because without it, we wouldn't have this. And so I want us to do this, and this is what I ask of you. There is no deal on the table. This, just like we did 5 years ago when we bought this property, we came together as a community, and we said, what do we want to see here? Now, granted, 5 years ago, data centers were kind of 10 megawatt, server rooms. We recognize they're completely different. Our struggle with, and we'll hear a little bit today from the panelists, is like, this seems to be happening regardless. And so how do we, because we can ask anything of this property because it's ours. We don't have to bow down to industrial zoning that says, well, you can't be onerous on this industry. You can demand full mitigations. You can demand that they use effluent from our wastewater treatment and not our potable water. We can demand that they make reusable, adaptable buildings if the industry dries up and moves on. We can make a lot of demands that we can't normally make because it's our property. And at the end of these couple seminars, the first ones are a lot of learning, the second one as well. The third one is where we gather back together and we really place our input and say what's important to us. And if at the end of it, we say, you know what? There's no way to really leverage this. There's no way to press this into something that could work for us. And it just fades away. Because the LOI expires and there's no action that has to be taken because there's nothing official actually happening right now. And so I ask, and the council asks, can we just take this time to have some competing ideas in our minds and look at how we take this industry, which just seems to be steamrolling across the country. Is there a way for us to take it by the horns and make it work for people instead of it just getting stampeded across us? This is why we called it the Star Innovation District in the first place. We didn't call it the Star Open Lands when we all came together with this. We called it the Star Innovation District to wrestle with these kind of problems. So even if nothing ever gets built, it still will have served its purpose by pressing this into the dialogue. Because right now, I know there's state legislation that's being pending and they're thinking about making stuff happen, but I've found in my 14 years of doing this that state legislation oftentimes is problematic. We're still fighting the SAFETY Act. The BUILD Act is problematic. So even if they do make legislation, which they don't have it yet, it still becomes it's on the shoulders of municipalities, which means it's on our shoulders. And so let's take this time and think through what can be done in order to set a standard throughout this industry so we just stop it rolling over all of us. So please, I ask that we work together as we've always done, because when we do work together, that is the result. And we've done this before together, and I ask that we do it again. So thank you for the time, thank you for being here, and I will turn it back over to Bob.
And just in case, I'm a person who wears his glasses and makes many mistakes when I take them off.
Oh, thanks, yes.
I'm accused frequently when I don't have my glasses on of not recognizing people, and I didn't recognize them. What I want to do, my role and my job is to just ask this august panel questions. Shortly, you'll probably see some white slips that I think some of the city staff, and if you have one, like city staff, I see Ben Bench, and there's a couple people down here, Ben, who have white slips. If your question didn't get answered in this panel conversation, we'll try to get that up there. And then also there's yellow slips out there for the public comment a portion of this. And so just to let you know who is up here with you, kind of who these folks are. And if each of you, and I should get your names correctly, and I hope I don't mispronounce anybody's name. But you've got first Sarah Moskovitz. Sarah, could you just wave to everybody? She's Executive Director of the Citizens Utility Board here in Illinois. No stranger to the doings in Illinois. When I walked in with her, she said if she wasn't here, she'd probably be in Springfield, and that's true. You've got Rachel Havelock. She is the Director of the Freshwater Lab at the University of Illinois, Chicago, right here in the city. You've got me, Dr. Bob McBride, Superintendent. I'm going to moderate this just by doing what I do, is try to teach and ask questions. Steve Streit, who you already know, Mayor of Lockport. We've got Mira Raja, and Mira is the Senior Vice President of Deep Tech, P33, like that. And then finally, we've got Kyle Schultz. He is the Deputy of Strategic Advancement for, do you go by CMAP? Right?
Yes.
CMAP, awesome, great. So I'm just going to start with the questions, and certainly I would invite panelists, even though the very first question I'm going to throw Kyle's way. You're probably going to see these panelists interact with each other, and I'd really invite each one of you just to do that in an organic way. If you have any technical difficulties with those mics, I'm here to help you. So Kyle, I'll throw this your way, and I'm sure there's a number of people who can answer this, but CMAP, as the region's planning agency, what sort of planning have you seen occur within the current data center industry? And what challenges arise when municipalities negotiate these large infrastructure projects in terms of power, gas, water, transmissions that are regional? So what's kind of the planning, and what are some of the problems and challenges you encounter?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As Bob said, Kyle Schultz. I'm the Deputy for Strategic Advancement at CMAP, which is an acronym for the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. We are the state-mandated transportation and land use policy planning agency for the 7 counties, 284 municipalities of northeastern Illinois. And appreciate the opportunity to come and hear from you all today, because as we go about the community, the data center conversation is front and center. If you are in the city of Chicago, if you are in Lockport, in Lake, McHenry, because this industry, as the mayor said, is moving so quickly, it is really putting a challenge on how our communities are embracing this. And the way I think about the question, as a person who is now in urban planning but had spent the last 15 years in economic development, is 6 years ago, our biggest topic, our biggest investment opportunity as a region was in distribution centers. This was coming out of COVID, where our shopping styles were changing, how we were purchasing goods, and our expectation for delivery of those goods had changed. And so companies were trying to match what us as consumers needed to do. And what you saw across Chicagoland But really, in your home county of Will County was an explosion of distribution centers that came without regional planning or regional coordination. And while communities welcomed those distribution centers, that welcome, that impact was not contained to just that community. Trucks rolled across Will County, they rolled across northeastern Illinois. And in a similar way, that's what the data center opportunity is having for us now. How do we think about this? And you'll hear from Sarah, you'll hear from Rachel, who are deeper into the infrastructure systems of data centers and how it works with our energy and our water. But as we think about this, a regional plan needs to be addressed. And we need to think not just about Lockport, though you all have the keyest voices. How is this going to impact us as a region? This is the foundation for what the digital economy of the future will be. And how do we want to embrace that? How do we want to have that part of our communities moving forward?
And I'll echo that, Kyle. One of the things that I've been talking with Kyle now for the better part of a year or more since I've got to know him is that has been a frustration. We watched individual municipalities put distribution centers right at the edge of their towns because it's like, well, that's not going to affect me, but then they all roll right through our town over our bridge. And and ever since then, the county's been trying to rack their brains with how do we manage this truck traffic? And it's like, no, man, you can't do it now. We have to do it in the beginning before it steamrolls us. And this is why, whether it's with CMAP or when I'm with Metropolitan Mayor Caucus meetings, I keep saying, like, look, we have to come up with an overall plan for this and just can't let it be built out by individual municipal deals.
And so thinking about a regional approach, this is probably for Mira, and for Kyle, agreements, specifically non-disclosure agreements that might be executed. A few things to think about. How does that impact municipal, kind of right here, decision-making, regional planning, and then also just communicate, coordination between agencies and communities. Either one of you, probably both of you, could speak to that.
Hello? Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the opportunity to hear from you all and talk to you. My name is Mira Raja. I'm the SVP of Deep Tech at P33. P33 also, we look at economic development. So that's sort of the lens I'm bringing to this. And I think one of the things that is very apparent here, and as we all talk, you'll sort of keep hearing, is this isn't just going to affect one of us. It's not siloed. None of these things are going to affect one resource, one person, one zip code, even one city. And so we have to take a coordinated approach to this because we have to better understand what is CMAP thinking about, what are you all thinking about, what is Mayor Streit thinking about, and to do that, you need to have these dialogues, you need to have these conversations, and it has to be transparent, it can't be super closed. Some of these NDAs it's a tricky thing because you want to think about privacy, you want to think about what you're protecting. At the same time, you want to be really careful that we are actually having space and having place for open dialogue. And so I think the biggest thing across when we're thinking about how we plan these is how are we not working in silos? How are we having that broader conversation?
Yeah, the NDA element of that conversation, while most of the companies want to have that to protect their intellectual property, protect their investment decisions from market considerations, it ultimately ends up hurting communities, right? I think the mayor has really framed this for our understanding at CMAP as this is the 21st century's equivalent of what the railroads were in the 19th century. Heavily capital intensive, being built fast, often faster than what communities could keep up with. And so NDAs allow those companies to not focus on what matters, which is ultimately the community and the residents in which will benefit from that investment, hopefully. Okay. Happy to hear.
It should be, yeah, take a second.
If you do have a question, please.
Happy to hear the feedback. Well, wasn't trying to BS.
Yeah, and I just would, as the moderator, I think it's very important that we exercise some listening. I think, if, with your permission, I would say I think the railroad was an analogy. It was not an equivocation with data centers. And I would just ask everybody there's a period of listening with these panelists, and all these folks are, volunteering their time. And then there is a time when I'm going to have the questions that you've asked on your white sheets. There's going to be a public comment as well. So I would just ask you in this space, in a school space, just to think that through and just take a minute, and like the mayor said, let's do this together. I think that really helps. A question that just came to my mind, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Mayor Streit, but, Mira and Kyle brought up the importance of a regional approach, that any kind of decision like this impacts power, water, emissions, from a regional point of view. But if that is the case, what I'm curious about that you might be able to share with us is why are municipalities, Joliet right over the hill, approving these things at the municipal level? How is that working if it really is a regional approach? I don't know if you have an insight into that.
It makes perfect sense why it's happening is, because there's no state guardrails, there's no federal guardrails, this is being built out by 100 municipal deals. And when, a data center, there used to be a time when data centers got tax breaks. I tell you, they've been building data centers for 30 years. That script is completely flipped. Nobody's giving data centers incentives anymore because data centers are desperate for the land, the power, the water. And so today, they're just throwing money at municipalities. And so when a municipality is told, like, hey, listen, we can cut a deal and give you guys millions of dollars up front, the thing that mayors struggle with in municipalities, I can tell you already what the deal is. People are like, oh, they're lying in their pockets or they're getting rich. No, they're not. What mayors have is an enormous amount of responsibility, and city councils. They have pension obligations. They have, people like, my road sucks, my water sucks, all those things that they are responsible for. And so if they find that, okay, here's an opportunity to get a lot of money that we can then take care of those problems without raising taxes, they find them almost like impossible to say no to. And this is why we see this happening over and over and over again. But again, we have to have a regional approach to this. That is not the way to build out this kind of thing. And I agree with you, Kyle. The railroad analogy works in the sense that when we had finished digging the canal in 1849, that was a big deal. And then right when it got finished, what happened? The railroad industry blazed a rail line right through the center of town. Where the railroad tracks are today used to be Commerce Street. That was where all the business from the canal was being done. And all of a sudden the railroad's like, coming through. That was a major anxiety shift. You'd imagine all the people that invested money into the canal were suddenly upended by the railroad. And in the 1850s and 60s, they were given carte blanche by the United States government to do whatever. We can't even do work in the right-of-way without months and months of going to the railroad. They kind of have autonomy that if we want to do a quiet zone, it takes years and lots of tons of infrastructure that we have to pay for because the railroad has autonomy. And there's nothing we can do about it because they keep waving this piece of paper from Robert Lincoln from 1865. And so we can't let that happen again. This is why regional planning is critical to this.
And, maybe a question on some of the questions, that I have. This might be for you, Mira, or for any of the panelists. But, building on that analogy where the AI economy, the automated economy is generating wealth. So if you're planning from a regional point of view, how do regions position themselves to be beneficiaries of that? So that it isn't folks, from far away who are beneficiaries. It's local regions who are also beneficiaries as well.
Absolutely. I think it's a great question, and I think it's where this conversation gets honestly very tricky, just to be really sincere about this. You want to say no. You want to say, no, I don't want this here. I've heard many of you say absolutely not and boo. And it's connected. And so when you say no and it goes next door, you also stop having a voice in that conversation, right? And I think that's really, really important. All of your voices are really important here. We need to make sure they're heard so that we can figure out if this is sort of the future of infrastructure a little bit, right? In whatever analogy you want to think about it, if that industry is being built and some of this infrastructure is being built, how are we sure? How can we make sure everything that you're saying is incorporated into that, so that those benefits do come through? So that at the beginning we can think about, well, what are all the places that if this infrastructure gets built, what's that all going to affect, right? Is it going to affect your resources? Is it going to affect jobs? Is it going to affect other industries that are being built around here, right? And some of those you can take a positive view to that or a negative view to that. Some of that you can say, well, no, it's going to use up all our resources. Some of it you can say, well, maybe it can generate a bunch of other industry around here. Maybe it could take it away. You could either, you know,
Maybe you hear the words out of your mouth. Maybe they don't even have an idea. And whether that's you, hold on.
That's that point where we don't know what the AI industry really is.
Think about it. What kind of common sense does it make to think about building an industry that doesn't have an end game that you know about?
The thing is, I agree with you. I agree with you that there is no actual end game for it. And this is what I've been talking about within the region now for 2 years.
That's not what I said. That is not what I said. What I said is, you don't know what their end game is. They have an end game, and you're playing right on end.
Well, is it going to get built whether we say no or not?
That's the whole point. But I don't want to hear a bunch of BS political commentary coming from a guy who gets the vote. I voted against you. I don't like what I hear it.
That's fine, man. I think.
You're here as a mayor, and you're spouting some kind of expertise on this AI, and you.
I'm actually not. That's why I brought other people in.
Hey, wait a minute. You're the one sitting up here. You're a leader of this community. At some point, you have to take some kind of responsibility. We're not knowing what you're doing. We're not knowing. There are so many experts in this field of AI that can tell you which end is up and which end is down.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you.
Oh, I can introduce you.
I'm not.
I can introduce you.
We have 3 workshops. Be part of the conversation.
I'm sorry.
Please and thank you.
You're going to have to up your game. You're going to have to up your game. This is not going to be solved. Your education is not going to be solved here in Lockport. It's going to be like you going out and reading. It's going to be going you going out listening to lectures, but people actually know what the skin of the game is.
Friend, you're assuming that I have not been to lectures, that I haven't been to these places, that I haven't listened to the fears and concerns of the AI industry. I absolutely have.
And I don't mean to cut either one of you off, but I always think it's important to acknowledge there are a lot of people in the room. And one of the things that I just know from just a learning point of view is actually next week, June 4th, is all about, the topic is the artificial intelligence and automation economy, going deep into that. I don't know the content just as the moderator, but I do know that. And then I do know that the third workshop is really more open in your feedback and on these first 2. So I might just ask, if we could tackle a variety of different questions here. I think that's important, because also what I wouldn't want to see squeezed is some of our peers here are here for the public comment, and then also I definitely want to get to those white sheets that so many of you filled out. And I just know from a time proposition, time is built in, but we might not be able to get to that, if we're just having some very, very narrow conversations. That's not to marginalize you, sir. It's not certainly to marginalize you as the mayor. But I think just for me as the moderator looking at these questions, I think there's some questions. I have a panel. I'm going to try to steward the conversation that way and kind of get you into the next phase next week. And then also open it up on June 25th, really for you. If that's okay, if that's all right with everybody. Just asking humbly. That's not to marginalize anybody's voice, really, seriously. Because I guess I'm trying to get to the white sheets and not to run roughshod over some of these opening questions. So with your permission, I maybe want to throw this one Sarah's way, because I think there is a lot of fear. There's all sorts of fear, economically, automation, how do we feel about that as human beings? So maybe Sarah, if you could jump in on this. One fear I think is cost. And oftentimes residents in these, issues are worried about their own electric bills, their own power capacity. How can, a data center impact a resident's electric bill? Are those costs localized here municipally? Are they regional? Maybe impact a citizen from a town who doesn't even live in Lockport but's going to be impacted by this. So if you don't mind picking that up, that'd be great.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It is cool to be here. I have not experienced a crowd this lively since I was in Bolingbrook a couple of years ago talking about Illinois American Water. So. So I'm Sarah Moskowitz. I'm the head of the Citizens Utility Board. We're a utility ratepayer advocacy organization. It works across, oh, shucks, thanks guys. And I use this as a laugh line at the last one of these I did last week in Chicago, but I'm here to make sure that data centers aren't going to drive up your electric bills. All right. Haha, just kidding, they already have. And so it's hard to, I know that you all want to get home before midnight, and so I've been working on ways to kind of break it down, and I think maybe the easiest way, let me know afterwards, is to think about your ComEd bill. You all are ComEd customers, right? And I'm sure you look at your bill every single month before you pay that bill, right? Please tell me that you do. So your bill is made up of a few different sections, right? There's the delivery section, there's the supply section, there's the taxes and fees. You can see your meter reading on there. I know it all looks like it was written in Martian, but if you actually familiarize yourself with the bill, you can learn a lot about how our energy system works. And so in Illinois, we're a restructured state, which means that our electric utilities here in Northern Illinois, it's ComEd, don't own power generation. ComEd has not owned any power plants since the late 90s. So the delivery part of your bill is how ComEd makes its money. So they charge us and they earn a profit off of the investments they make to keep the local distribution system running. The actual juice itself, the actual power commodity, that is set by a wholesale market. The wholesale market that we belong to here in Northern Illinois is called PJM. PJM stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. We here in Northern Illinois are connected to a grid that goes all the way to Northern Virginia, which is where my mom lives, which is ground zero for hyperscale data center development. And so these gigantic loads, and I'm not talking about the data centers like you have in Elk Grove Village that have been around for 20 years and they're relatively small. I'm talking about hyperscale AI learning data centers like the ones that recently nearby got approved that if built, could potentially use as much power as a medium to large city, right? So those...
Basically, almost the entire output of Braidwood nuclear plant.
Nice, okay, well then, yeah.
Data center.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so those facilities can drive up our ComEd bills on all of those ways. So it costs money to connect them to the local grid. It also costs money to develop new power generation to meet their needs. And so a year ago, when's June 1st? Whenever, like this weekend, right? A year ago, when ComEd prices skyrocketed last summer, that was because of forecasted data center load. The independent market monitor at PJM looked into this and found that this giant spike was largely because of forecasted data center load. I say forecasted because we have to build out, we need to prepare ourselves to have enough infrastructure, transmission, power generation online in case this stuff shows up. What if it doesn't? Who's left holding the bag? So for, we have a volunteer right there. You are going to be left holding the bag. So we have been benefiting from a couple of decades now of flat demand for electricity. So over as a country, our like through the 50s, 60s, we're getting air conditioning and stuff. The demand for electricity kept growing, and so the way that we're historically, the utility regulatory model was historically built was for slow and steady growth in demand for electricity. And the idea was all of us are going to cover the costs to develop the system, because the new customers coming onto the system will pay off those costs by being on the system. And you're basically spreading those costs over a larger number of kilowatt hours. That can, in theory, keep the prices down. And under normal, predictable, slow and steady load growth, this worked. Now you have like the entire city of St. Louis might want to interconnect all at once. And so what is that going to do to our infrastructure, the way that we recover the cost of infrastructure? What is that going to do to the unregulated wholesale power markets? And so we've been going along at, our prices being about the same, not a whole bunch of need for new juice to come on the system. We're actually able to retire a lot of fossil-fueled power plants, old power plants that weren't working super efficiently. Suddenly, the forecast in load skyrocketed again. And our market operators like, uh-oh, we're in trouble. We do not have enough reserves in power generation to create a comfortable cushion anymore in case we all decide to turn on all of our electricity and all of our air conditioning, and we have a bunch of hyperscale data centers online all at once. We need to send a market signal, i.e. evoke higher prices to incentivize more power generators to come online. Now, that kind of worked when it was kind of slow and steady, but the amount of power generation that we need, we're talking about like whole brand new power plants, giant power plants to come online. And we all right now are being asked to cover the costs of that up front in case all these data centers show up. And we know that a lot of these developers are shopping around the same data center in different jurisdictions. So I might be, oh God, I wish. I might be Meta, and I'm gonna build one hyperscale, and I'm gonna see if I can interconnect in New Jersey. I'm gonna see if I can interconnect in Virginia. I'm gonna see if I can interconnect in Indiana or something. But I'm only gonna build one. But meanwhile, I've put in those applications. I've sent out those feelers, or maybe I've talked to a utility executive at a cocktail party, saying that I want to build a data center in their jurisdiction. So then they turn around and tell the wholesale market operator, hey, we have this giant data center that's going to be built. We're going to need all this power capacity to come online. And so now we have a market that's designed to bring about all of this power generation. But what if it doesn't all show up? Again, who's paying for it? So that's the challenge that we're at right now. And under the current regulatory construct, both at the state level and at the federal level, there are no guarantees that all of us, residential ratepayers, are not going to be subsidizing the build out of the power infrastructure to meet these guys' needs. We don't have any assurances to that. Now, there have been developments recently. I know. See, you give me a mic and I will never shut up. But we have, so the Illinois Commerce Commission, there was a new large load tariff approved at the ICC for ComEd. Better than nothing. ComEd has signed some transmission security agreements with some large loads, some large customers who we don't know exactly who they are because this is all negotiated behind closed doors. Better than nothing. We see in a lot of jurisdictions, these data centers will enter into some, like what they call a take or pay contract with the local distribution utility. So, you build out this infrastructure to interconnect our giant facility. We promise to show up and buy enough electricity over the next few decades to cover those costs. But the problem with those contracts is it's only up to like 80%, 70%, 80%. They're not promising to cover 100% of their costs. So who's left paying the delta? We are. So we've been operating in the dark, and meanwhile, our power prices are going up. And I am thrilled to see the energy in this room and how passionate. I've been doing this work for almost 26 years, and I've never seen people show up to talk about the issues that I talk about like this. It's wonderful. But just know that if you're worried about local land use, talk to your municipal officials, right, about your concerns. If you're worried about like noise, if you're worried about how those property taxes are going to be spent, if you're worried about if they're going to be backup diesel generators running in your neighborhood, that kind of stuff, like you should be focusing your attention right here. But if you're worried about the impact that these data centers are going to have on your electric bill, if you're worried about the impact that they're going to have on our energy mix, whether we're going to be building new fossil fuel power plants that we may not even need to meet their needs, the needs of this big tech, if you're worried about that kind of stuff, you really need to take this energy to the state capitol and to the feds. There's a lot of, it is an alternate universe. So I know that we don't know if this is going to happen. Thank you. But like really, I love, but we need to do something at the regional level to make sure that that we're protected from the costs. And Mr. Mayor here can't do that. You can do a lot of things. You can't do that.
Sure, no, and I appreciate you educating us on it. And that has been the problem. People are like, oh, if you build this here, electric bills are going to go up. The reality is, if it's built in Ohio, your electric bill is going to go up. It doesn't matter because we're all part of the same large grid, which goes back to this continuous press. We have to have a regional, even a national plan.
I will say that it still makes sense. There's still a lot we can do at the state level. So that's like, you could twist what you said and turn that into an argument why it's futile to do anything in Springfield, but that's actually not true. I won't get in. There are things like we can price separate from the rest of the grid if things go south here in Illinois. We can also influence our own in-state energy mix. So there are reasons still, despite the fact that we're connected to a multi-state grid, to do something here in the state of Illinois.
Well, I have a follow-up question. So one of the things that ComEd has tried to do to help mitigate this is they do cluster studies now. So it used to be if a factory went in, correct me if I'm wrong, but if a factory went in to make widgets and they needed 20 megawatts of power, ComEd would just kind of figure out what that's going to cost and socialize it throughout the whole grid. But now, because there's such great demand with gigawatts at a time, they're like, hold on. If you guys want to do this, we're not doing it for free, and we're not going to get stranded assets, meaning if you don't build this out, we've already factored in. So they're asking for money up front, right? So can you explain how that works, and does it actually protect us, or does it just protect ComEd?
Yeah, that's great. This is about that large load tariff, and like I said, that's better than nothing. That's better than it was. It used to be the case that if one of these giant facilities wanted to connect to the ComEd system, they had to pay a deposit of $1 million. And that's couch change to a lot of these companies, right? And so what they did is essentially they increased the amount of those upfront deposits. And then if the data center, or if the large customer doesn't show up, they don't get that deposit back. But if the cost of interconnecting them exceeds the amount of that deposit, the delta could be socialized across the customers. So what they did here is better than it was, but it still doesn't protect us 100%.
It seems like they always have record profits, and yet they never have to use their profits to invest into the grid ahead of this use, so it's not, the burden is not put on us all the time, every time. Look at Texas, look at everything.
And it seems a kind of a follow-up on, a follow-up on that, Sarah, as you mentioned, part of that dynamic, and the dynamic that you mentioned is power generation. Sounds like what you're saying is that power generation is lagging behind need, and there needs to be a new generation of a new technology, new generation of power generation to do that.
Solar farm instead of a data center.
So, yeah, so I'm just curious, like, how far away is that new power generation And what are some of the implications of that?
Well,
Or anybody on the panel,
So
really.
This is an issue too, and I don't want to like totally bogart the mic for the rest of the night, but I will. It takes a long time to build traditional power generation. You know, there's a backlog in gas turbines. You know it's going to take at least 5 years to build a new like gas-fired power plant, regardless of the fact that we're not even supposed to be building them in the state of Illinois anymore under our current regulations, right? But meanwhile, all of the big tech, they want speed to power. They want to connect right away. You know, so I think that's an issue, and the question, of course, is like, are these wholesale market signals actually sending a signal that can bring about the development of new power generation in time? And we, as ratepayer advocates, don't think the answer is yes. We think the answer is no. So, you know, so then what about faster, more sustainable, cheaper forms like demand response? Sorry, I'm lapsing into jargon. This is the idea of like sending a signal to get certain kinds of industries to use less during peak times. Because a lot of what we're paying for when we're paying for electricity isn't the electricity that we're using. It's for the electricity that we could be using. We have to build out this whole system just to meet a few hours peaks every year. So what if we just cut those peaks
Isn't the
instead?
struggle, though, with data centers is that they're continuous load. There's no everybody goes to bed at night and it slows down. It's continuous.
No.
Or am I wrong on that?
No, when it's hotter, the machines also get hotter. So there's some scenarios of cooling if it's cold temperature, like in a data center. I mean, there's a possibility of cooling where they kind of open their windows. So there is peak that looks at the same kind of peak that it looks like in our homes.
So I have a question for Mira. Mira, why one of the things that people get concerned about is like, why can't they just build all these things in Alaska, right? Like, why can't you just build data centers far away where they're not in our backyards? Why is that not the case?
Well, a bunch of people booed here, so I think maybe we don't want to move them all to Alaska. But I think I would say, going back to what I was starting to say earlier, I think we are still, when we think about where industry is coming broadly, right? Like, it's not necessarily the data center industry, but when we think about how we're building up sort of economic development in regions, some of these things are important to get other industry here, because this is where sort of that power is, this is where that compute is, and feel the way you do about, you know, compute as an industry, and I think I hear how you all feel about compute as an industry, but there are a lot of other businesses that are tagged to that, and those are all businesses that are useful, that bring a bunch of other jobs. And I know that, so an example that was just announced through IBM. IBM and the City Colleges of Chicago came, and a few other folks, just a couple weeks ago was announced, because sort of the broader region is thought about as the future of compute, IBM has said, we really want to come here and we want to be sort of different about how we think about AI. Sort of how most companies are thinking about it and how we are hearing people thinking about it is, this is going to get rid of jobs, right? Like, but what they're saying is this is a chance to train people in these new these new industries that are using that compute power. Those are actually net new jobs that are coming in, because you're starting to think about, how do you use compute to build better drugs? How do you use, you know, computation to optimize different things? How do you even think about it for the electric grid, right? Like, how do you actually take some of these questions we're having and use that compute power to optimize that? And those are all brand new jobs. And those, what IBM has come in and said is, that's great, we want to actually talk to those industries that this compute is serving, think about where those new jobs are, and start training people for those jobs. So they announced this IBM Future Now Center here over in Chicago, and the goal of that is to they're bringing 700 new jobs. They're connecting with the city. They're connecting with the city colleges to create an apprenticeship program.
Really, percentage-wise, you're talking, this is supposed to encourage us to feel empowered that there comes to us and going to give us 700 jobs out. How many people live in the city of Chicago proper? Around 4.5 million.
Again, I actually agree with you more than you think. I have the same problem with the job commute. I mean, I'm a graphic designer. Who's got kicked between the legs more than graphic designer with AI, large language models? I get the problem with it, man. And so it's like, it is about how do we as humans really, you know, if the end game is really about automating not just white collar jobs, they can do that right now, right? It's also about automating labor, automating all these logistics industries, right? All of that. If that really is the end game, I guess the harder question is, how do we as humans adapt in a massive paradigm change? There's only so many people that can, like, you know, sell stuff online, right? Or do this kind of thing. Like what really, how do we adapt in a future? I think that's an open-ended question, Mira, and I don't think you have an answer per se, but I think that is one of the struggles that we see with all of this, is where it's going.
Everything that we've heard from every person that I've heard and listened to is short-term and long-term cost benefit analysis. I have heard nothing about a business continuity plan or a disaster recovery plan that would cover in the case of, everybody's talking about the future. We're already paying for the future right now. So with that being said, if this doesn't occur here, are we getting our money back? No, we won't. We never will.
You're talking about like when we pay into the larger grid system?
In general. The thing that kills me though is what happens to the environment and in surrounding cities and towns if there's water contamination, etc.
Well,
I think Bob can lead us to a next question, because I actually would like to talk about water.
You are a mind reader, because I did want to honor, I've seen a lot of water signs, environmental signs. We've talked about power generation, we've talked about the cost of our electric bills, we've talked about those kind of costs, power generation, how are we going to keep up? But you and I are on the same wavelength, because I was thinking maybe turning it back to you, Rachel, just about, environmental impacts, maybe starting with water.
White sheets, please.
We're going to try to get to the white sheets. I'm sure they're going to be down in a second. But
do you want to hear about water?
Yeah, cooling
Okay.
and water.
Okay.
Right, I wanted to kind of get you to water.
Okay.
Because I've seen a lot of posters about water.
You gotta know what kind of cooling you're using. Are you pulling off the river? You have to.
Well, sir, if I could, with your permission, if we could give the panelist a chance to maybe use her expertise and address that. Just because I do want to get to those white sheets. So, Rachel, if you don't mind speaking a little bit about water,
A little
its
bit on
impact,
water.
its
I'll go
environmental impact.
quickly. I also agree with Sarah. I've been working on water issues and water policies in Rust Belt states, where our vision at the Freshwater Lab is that we become the Water Belt states. So one thing about this data center sweep across the country and across the world is that we're all talking about water. And when we're all talking about water, even when there are disputes, and I can say this, I spent many decades working in the Middle East, even when there are disputes, this is the bottom line of what connects us as human beings and what connects us to other ecosystems, to the past and to the future. So I see in these moments and in these passions a really productive identification of what we all have in common, and that investment in wanting a common future. So, okay, a hyperscale data center can use up to 5 million gallons of water a day. It is about the same as a medium-sized town. It's a copious amount of water, exactly as the person was saying in the back. There's a lot of variation in cooling systems, and I can get wonky, but I'll sort of get to the points, and I can get wonky if there's a desire. But the basic principle is that the water and energy inputs are always in relationship. So if a developer says, we're going to do air cooling, we're not going to use that much water, it's a bit of a false flag. because there's direct water use, water that is piped or drawn by the data center to cool the servers that run really hot because there's so many servers moving so quickly. So there's direct water use, but there's also indirect water use. Power creation, power generation requires energy on the back end. So a developer saying we're doing air conditioning is not a solution to the water issue. And that's the water energy nexus, and exactly as someone was saying, there's a lot to say about that and the relationship between the two. So this is a tremendous amount of water. I'm also really excited to be here in Lockport. I've been looking at your groundwater situation for a couple years, and I'm interested to hear from people that experience, but as I'm sure many of you know, your aquifer's in trouble, and it's got the extra added dimension of a fault line running through it. So there's a solution, for example, in Orange County, California, also a tremendous amount of aquifer drawdown. They are in Orange County capturing rainwater, wastewater, they're re-injecting it in the aquifer, then pulling it up and treating it as drinking water.
Well, let me try to narrow this a little bit, if you don't mind, Rachel. One of the things that we as a council just said off the cuff before even, like we said, look, we're going to go to the community with this and have our workshops. I said, but we were very clear that you can't use our potable water. We're not going to use potable water to cool data centers. I said, if you want to purchase effluent wastewater from our treatment plant, we expel about 2 million gallons a day. That's what we told them they could use. They can buy effluent from us, not use our potable water. Can you tell us if that's a reality or is that fantasy? Can you focus on that, please?
Absolutely a reality. So despite the fact that data centers need copious amounts of water, they do not need drinking level water. And this is opening up something which I think is a bit overdue in Illinois, which is not sending our treated wastewater that is at a high level out of state. Right? The state of Illinois is the largest diverter of fresh water on the planet because all of our rainwater, all of our treated wastewater is ultimately released into the sanitary and ship canal, and all of this really high quality water that we could be using for economic growth, right? And widening our water portfolio, we're currently sending out of state. So I am not an apologist for data centers, right? I'm not saying this is great, now we can recycle the water. I am pretty much of the mind that any new industry coming into northeastern Illinois should run on recycled water. So data center, no data center, whatever happens in that space, I think your mayor is really on to something, because there is absolutely no reason to give drinking water to data centers or to other industrial uses. And a really, really important point to make there is this is absolutely something which can be demanded, because the same companies and the same developers, when they develop, for example, in the American West, in California, in Arizona, and even there's some new developments even out of Virginia, because there are so many hyperscales, these companies are used to running on recycled water. And it's also really important that selling that effluent, right, that from a municipal treatment plant brings in new rates to the utility. So where we currently all pay a sewage bill or we pay a tax, depending on the scenario, right? And then we treat that water like waste. We send it out of state, it contributes to a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. We're paying to treat water like waste. When that water can be reclaimed, if the companies need a higher quality than the level of the discharge, which is already to EPA standards, it has to be, if they need a higher quality of water, that's called fit for purpose treatment. they can establish an extra layer of treatment at your plant, or they can build it on their facility. So this running, industry running data centers on effluent is in practice with a lot of innovation in other parts of the country. And that should be, I think, an absolute baseline for you, for our state, for data centers, and for all the industries that we want to attract in the name of economic development. So no more single-use water.
And just because of this concern and the gentleman that was up here and this gentleman, for the panel, maybe I know, Mira, this probably comes into your area, but also really for any of you. What other environmental factors, concerns are you aware of that we should all be considering for this kind of project? Are there things, in addition to water, or other things power generation obviously can cause environmental, but just things we should be thinking about?
Not just the power generation that goes like utility scale or industrial scale power generation, but the backup generators on site. I'm just going to say it. That is the vibe I got in Aurora when I went to some very fiery town halls in Aurora. That was like really what ticked people off, was like they messed up there, and the Cyrus One data center tripped something in the system and ran its backup power generators for like 10 days.
So let me ask you guys this. The first time we started visiting data centers to kind of investigate and see what they're about, we went to Elk Grove Village, but it was an old Equinox data center, which basically, stores cat video. So it had like internal diesel generators, some big Fairbanks Morse, generators that, sound was mitigated because they were indoors and that kind of stuff. But from the way I'm seeing it now, not even using diesel generators anymore. They're more moving to natural gas. What is the reality? Is there indications that burns cleaner? Is it indications that there's less noise? Or can they be 100% mitigated for sound, vibration, and all those things? What are those possibilities? Have you seen that kind of mitigation anywhere?
I am not an expert on that.
No. One of the proposing up in Joliet's 200 diesel generators.
Yeah.
That's being proposed now.
And we're not Joliet. Yes.
I'm saying like the current development, still building diesel generators.
That's my understanding as well.
But it doesn't mean that needs to be accepted. And that's one thing I think we.
We're all doing
Yeah.
what the industry is doing.
No, actually, I have seen it with other places. Here's the thing. One thing that's important to understand, and it comes down to this when it comes to the water issue, right? Because we own the land, we can make extraordinary demands. And again, I'm not telling you that we need to do this or not. But this is a moment to press back on this industry, which has just been rolling across the country, and say these are the kind of things. Nobody should be building this with normal water. They should be using effluent. They should be able to cover the costs of full discharge mitigations. They should have zero emissions and sound at the border. We don't need to compromise on that for anything. And I think that has been the whole point of what we were trying to have with this conversation. And we're not under normal zoning, right? Normal zoning in industry, if we said, oh, you have to have zero lot line emission sounds, you can't go more than 20 decibels over the, well, in a normal property that was owned by private property owners, they would say, well, that's onerous. You can't beat us up harder than another industry. But because we own the property, we can make any sort of demands. We can tell them, you have to use effluent from our wastewater treatment plant. You have to have zero lot lines for emissions. You have to have on-site generation. What is the kind of status? Maybe Kyle, I don't know, you've been around a little bit. Have you heard of any practical on-site generation, or is that just not there yet?
From the conversations I've had, they're still trying to figure out what is the most appropriate, economical for their interest on site.
And Kyle, go ahead. Yeah, Rachel.
There is one, I mean, we'll see what happens, but a lot of push in California by the Center for Biological Diversity did like push one of these data centers to a full like zero cost closed loop set of promises. Again, we'll see what happens, but that from my own reading, that was, again, environmental organization through the municipality pushing, and there was an agreement signed to those ends.
How familiar are you guys with the Power Act that's being debated in Springfield? Right? I know we're kind of perfectly open to hearing what comes out of Springfield. My experience over time is that a lot of times what comes out of Springfield's tough, it's problematic, right? We're still trying to fix the Safety Act. The Build Act seems to be a catastrophe, right? So my expectations are low, but do you guys find that there's anything in the Power Act that actually can resolve some of these concerns as this industry is getting built?
I'll field that one. I would be in Springfield talking about the Power Act if it weren't for the fact that I didn't want to be in Springfield, actually. So the Power Act is a very ambitious piece of proposed legislation that I'm sure is going to be negotiated, all right? I think I can say out loud that the Power Act as written probably won't pass, because this was kind of dreamt up by advocates and environmentalists and community advocates to kind of like to cover the entire wish list. So it does a lot in terms of around transparency. It prohibits data centers from being developers entering into NDAs with municipalities. It requires these facilities to disclose to regulators how much electricity and water they expect their facility to use. Important to me is it would require these facilities to cover their own energy and capacity needs, so that instead of pulling existing generation out of kind of the market, or to put it another way, instead of forcing residential ratepayers to compete with them for the same generation sources, they would actually have to fund the construction of new additive, clean generation to cover all of their needs, so that isn't up to the existing power generation mix. Then there's stuff in there about limiting the amount of diesel generation backup time and other parts that I'm less expert in, but it is quite broad-reaching. But we will see.
That's all free lobbyists.
I'm sure the lobbyists are not pre-lobbyists. I'm sure they're very busy right now.
Yeah. Did I say earlier, call your legislator?
It's actually some of the reason why, having this conversation at the municipal level is important, because as they try to figure this out, and, lobbyists are in Springfield and they're it's like, it could be a year, 2 years, who knows when the legislation happens. But what actually is happening are these data centers continue to get built, one municipality at a time. And it's like, unless there's any sort of demands or mitigations that make sense, that hold this industry accountable so it stops externalizing costs onto residents, it's going to continue to build. Part of this conversation is about asking those questions and running this up. I know CMAP is here listening to this. I know Rachel Ventura is listening to this. I know Congressman Foster is listening to this. And so having this conversation and being able to be part of it, and again, like I said earlier, I don't care if we ever build a data center or not. It doesn't matter to me. What actually matters to me is that we press back on what's in front of us now. And it's a conversation that's worth having, because it's going to get built around us regardless. And so can we influence that conversation? We actually can if we're doing it.
I am holding in my hand 10 questions from folks out there, and I want to make sure I ask all 10 of them, and that's going to take some time. And we have public comment, so I have lots more questions that I'd like to ask, but I think these are awfully important, so I just throw these to anybody on the panel. And I don't think people intended to have their name read, so I'm just going to read the question with your permission. if a data center is built, who would have the responsibility of long-term monitoring, and how often would numbers and operation be verified? So who is monitoring said data center? How does that go?
I would say at the moment, it's on the backs of municipalities to come at that, because there's no state or federal legislation that demands it. So unless a municipality demands that the industry pays for third-party monitoring that we choose, not them, we choose and they pay for, I don't see how else it's done. It has to be at a municipal level at the moment.
The city had 50 million gallons of water stolen, and they were told that they would only take half that amount.
Yeah. That's why I'm like, you can't touch our potable water. You can steal 50 million gallons of our effluent, it's totally different.
This is an energy question. Concerning energy, can you imagine, will renewable energy ever be considered as a source to meet the baseload energy demands? And the questioner said the baseload would be generated via natural gas, nuclear, coal-fired. We talked about it earlier. Would renewable energy ever replace, I think this is what this question is asking, for baseload energy? I don't know if anyone feels comfortable answering that.
I think I'm probably the person to cover that one. I think eventually we can do that, but it will require much, and when I say eventually, because right now, here in Northern Illinois, we are very much reliant upon our nukes. And they use an immense amount, you can't cover the need of a data center with like an acre of solar panels and a couple of batteries. Like the amount of power needed for a town is an immense amount. And so there are a lot of people actively working on how to make battery storage work better, be cheaper, more efficient. That technology is getting a lot better. I expect it to continue to do so. That's going to be key. In order to make it happen, we will also need more transmission lines. Nobody likes transmission lines. That's something that keeps me up at night, but you need to be able to move the power from where it's being generated to where it's being used. So I think eventually, they didn't mention a time span there, so I can say, yeah, eventually I think we can do it, but it's going to take a lot of investment, it's going to take a lot of scientific, technological progress, and it's going to take a revamp of how people make money. Because the incumbent, the business as usual, is very active in putting its thumb on the scale to protect the business as usual.
Another question, I'm going to piggyback it to something I heard right in this area. It was also something I had on some of my moderator questions, but what is the lifespan, if anyone could speak to this, the lifespan of a data center? And I thought I heard someone ask over here, so I apologize if I'm mishearing. What if that technology moves on? Who is responsible for the repurposing, the physical plant itself? I don't know if anyone could add lifespan, and then who isn't, left with the facility if that technology advances and it moves on?
I would answer it this way, Bob. I would assume no time at all. And that is actually one of the other things I think is absolutely necessary with projects like this, is that they have to build adaptable, reusable buildings with a sinking fund. So if in 5 years the industry changes and they're building data centers in the sea, that we're not stuck with stranded assets. Because we've seen this happen before. It's happened multiple times. It happened to us with the oil refinery when they closed the first time. They'd look across the river and we see 2 corn towers that have been sitting empty for 40 years because the industry moved on. And we're all stuck with it. So no, these buildings have to be built in such a use that they're not one use. They have to be adaptable, reusable, and they have to have a sinking fund to help convert it if, in fact, when they move on. And that money should be put in starting in the beginning.
All right.
By the data center people, the actual industry that's building it.
This question is a preface, so bear with me. The profits from data centers should be viewed as a tax freeze for property owners and small businesses. Data centers do not create jobs, and job programs don't work related to data centers. How can we make this happen? And I think, how can you make profits ease the tax burden, but also job generation?
Do you want to take that? That feels like it's a good answer for the fact that Lockport owns
Well,
the site.
again, because we've been having these discussions at kind of like a higher level in the sense that like, how can we make these things work? It was actually one of the topics we wanted to discuss a little bit at the second workshop. I had conversations with Joliet Junior College, I had conversations with Lewis University about like, and I've attended panels where I've sat in with, North Central University and the very concerns that universities and such have. I listened to when I was at a panel with Congressman Foster and North Central College. They were like, how do we teach for the future, right? What kind of degrees? How many young people right now have a degree that they spent $120,000 on and they're already told, oh, AI's already taken this job? That's terrifying. It's frustrating. It's angry. There's no wonder there's much anger in the room. And so how talking to those folks is like, do we create an educational dynamic that helps people adapt? Right? When you have a 58-year-old person who, worked as an actuary their whole life and is suddenly thrown out of work from AI, that person doesn't need to go back to school. They need to make money right now. And so how does a campus, and this is the conversations we wanted to have with Lewis and JJC at the next meeting, how do we do that? And one of the things we mentioned, and again, just having conversation, is other towns have leveraged money for we're going to $100 million for sidewalks, right? It's like, well, how about if we use that money to build a campus in the Star Commons on the rest of the property that actually is built and geared towards humans and how we are to adapt in a future industry, because that industry should be paying for that retraining and that adaptability if it's going to be here.
One question here is, how will this benefit Lockport? Why here? And will taxes, water, and electric bills just go up? So kind of a two-part question. How will this benefit Lockport? Why here? And will this just drive those costs up?
I mean, does it benefit Lockport if we leverage that money to build out the Star Commons so that it is an educational campus? That's possible. Is it possible to sell effluent and with that money we reduce our water bills? Absolutely. I know Darren and I, Alderman Deskin, had talked about can we leverage this to help fund all of our schools? Right now this is in a single school district. Well, the high school benefits, but it's also Ludwig. It's like instead of them getting gobs of money, can we have it fund all of our schools? Taft has been landlocked. Fairmont has landlocked. So leveraging the funding for those kinds of things is an important piece of this. And it can be done at this point because there's no reason not to make those demands. And if they can't meet those demands, then they can move on.
This question, I don't know if you can answer, but how much could people expect their utility rates to go up, if you had something like a data center?
Again, I think we've discussed it that it doesn't matter whether it's here or whether it's in Ohio, it's still going to affect our bill the same. We can say no tomorrow, but if it goes and builds anywhere else, it's still the same effect. Or am I wrong on that?
Another question, and this might pivot to that. Why aren't we considering a solar farm?
We actually did part solar. One of the things that we talked about in the Star Innovation District when we got together as a community was solar was considered an acceptable use. And we actually did some solar. There's a piece of that property that was completely unbuildable because of the Army Corps and EPA restrictions. It used to be the old treatment plant for Chevron. It's that gravel area that's between the railroad tracks and the sanitary shipping canal. We did come into a contract with the company to lease that for 20 years, and they have done solar. And it's fine. When it generates, it could generate up to 8 megawatts if the sun is shining, but average is probably about 1.2 megawatts. So it's not that necessarily it's this great power generator, but it's enough lease to eventually pay us back for the property that we purchased it for as taxpayers, and also to cover the maintenance of the property. So for a piece of property, for a piece of that section of the Star Innovation District that was unbuildable, it was a good compromise. But we didn't want to do the whole field for that because we wanted to leave our options open for other possibilities. So we did in part solar.
This might be specific to you, Mayor, but anybody else, I think, in a broader perspective. What is the rush? Why not put this on the November ballot so people who are affected can have their voices heard?
There actually is no rush at all. That's the whole purpose, is that there's no rush. If this actually fizzles out by the time we go through all our workshops, it just goes away. There's nothing to approve. There's nothing on the agenda. This was about conversation so that we could say, can these things be made to work anywhere and not just here? It was a conversation that was why we called it the Star Innovation District in the first place, is so that we could have these higher level conversations. It's why we did it in the first place. So whether it got built or not, doesn't matter. It's about affecting the conversation is what is mostly important, but there is no rush. Nobody needs a data center. Is there pluses? Are there minuses? It's a fine conversation to have.
On the ballot then. If there is no rush, why are you rushing into all these preemptive meetings, which you openly admit you don't know what the ultimate aim of this AI companies are? And we haven't even had that discussion yet.
Yeah, that was actually the next meeting, because this is a complicated subject, which if we can go through it together, we can ask a lot of those questions.
I think the ultimate aim of what AI companies are up to is the top agenda. Because if you think it's just about data and stealing your information so they can have some kind of conspiracy to chip you, you're nuts. It's not about that.
It's not. They already can do that with the data centers they have.
No, it's about something much worse. It's about a fraud. It's about a fraud. That they don't have the science to back up their claim of what they wanted. We are not even going to get there just yet. But the point is, while you're talking about how we can manifest this thing through our municipal blah, 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 and our state blah, 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 we don't even have laws on the books to make this stuff enforceable. Enforceable. But you want to not wait for a November ballot initiative?
Why not?
Oh, why not?
I don't know.
I know why, because you're already making an agreement with it. Because what you see,
Sir, you're making a lot of speculations about a lot of things, and they're just not true.
Not speculation, pal.
Well, there's no speculation about any kind of deal that's here that's done. We wanted to have exactly the conversation we had the first time we did these workshops.
Well, if we could, I do have another question. And I want to make sure we get to that. But there is also a public comment as well. But I am a teacher. And what we always say is, I would encourage all of us to listen. It's an important thing to do, right? It's an important thing to do. This question gets to VME. Who is VME a broker for? Who, and if anybody could speak to that, who these brokers with data centers, who do they represent ultimately?
Well, it's one of the things that I've found to be the struggle as we've been working with CMAP and working with, other mayors and talking to other municipalities about the whole way that AI infrastructure is being built out. It's problematic in this sense. There's, 5 big tech companies up there that all use this infrastructure for the most part. It's not quite as big as it, but it's like the ones that are really pressing for the hyperscales. There's all kind of different data centers, by the way. There's hyperscale, there's inference, there's edge compute, there's all kind of different levels. The ones that we were familiar with, I think when the community gave it an acceptable use 5 years ago was, again, things that were under 10 megawatts. And, what I'm finding now, though, is that the whole industry is getting built out through developers in the middle lane. And this is kind of what a little bit, we heard from Sarah as well, is that they're just out there shopping. Right? And so a lot of these developers, they go out, they try to find land allocations, water allocations, and power allocations, and then they don't even know exactly who they're selling it to. They go then take this thing back out to big tech and say, look, I've got 80 acres or 180 acres, or I've got a gigawatt. And so that's when they go back out and sell it, which is why this whole thing has been problematic. This is why NDAs are problematic. It's not to protect municipalities, it's to protect the industry people from each other. And this is why this has been very problematic. And I think the Power Act, pulling all that stuff out is essential, because if the nation really is going to move forward with a civilization scale infrastructure, it can't be done by individual municipalities across, the nation. It has to have a larger context for that. And so who are these people? They're just another industry, people like everybody else who's building out data centers. They just are trying to find allocations that they can then go sell elsewhere.
I did get a final question, and the final question was, before public comment, I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor Stride. Would we continue to own the land after the data center would be built? Does the city still own it?
All that, if we even went there, would be part of negotiations, right? If at the end of the third workshop, the community, there's enough, say, you know what, let's explore the next step. If there was, all that's the part of the negotiations. All of it is to say, you know what, we can sell the land, but we have a clawback that says if the industry moves on and leaves these abandoned buildings that are adaptable, reusable buildings, because that's what we require, then they default back to the city along with the sinking fund. Those are negotiations that we do, right? All that kind of stuff would be what we would discuss if, in fact, at the end of these workshops, the community said, well, all right, let's see. That doesn't mean we're obligated to do anything. But that is part of the negotiation piece that we would do in the future, if it went to that.
All right. Hey, before I turn it back over to Mayor Strite, the public comment portion of the meeting, could you give your panelists, these folks are just volunteering their time, come on out to talk to you. So I just think, they could be doing other things this evening. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you for letting me be your moderator. I learned a ton tonight. As I mentioned before, Lockport Township High School District 205, we're just like you. We want to know more. We're learning. We don't have a position. We want to know more. We want to understand everything that's going on in our community because we have a stake in you and the children that come to this school. I did have another school board member that I didn't see, Candace Garrettson. She's right there, so just want to acknowledge you, Mrs. Garrettson. I really want to thank you. I want to thank you because, you are engaged in your municipality, and that's a thing called democracy. And, without people engaged in what's happening around them, that's when we kind of lose our voice, and that's the spirit of public education. So on behalf of public educator, really thank you. I want to turn it over to Mayor Strite for the end of the meeting and the public comment session.
Okay, thank you. We did, like we always try to do, reserve some time for public comments to come up to the speakers. Obviously, there's been a lot of public comment without going to the speakers, but I think we have some yellow cards of people that wanted to do this. About how many do we have? 15? All right. So a couple things about getting feedback. We have 20 minutes for public comment, but it's not enough, right? I would stay here all night, but I'm not here to tie up the facilities. But I want you guys to continue to put questions that you don't have answers to. I believe you got cards when you came in. Upload them onto a continuous feedback that we're going to have, quick Q&As on the Star Innovation District Master Plan website so that we can continue to ask questions that aren't answered here today. It's a hugely complicated subject. And I appreciate those who came out and want to kind of have this discussion. It's the biggest thing in front of us, and it's worth having the conversation, regardless of where this goes in the future. So, a couple questions. Nicholas Paris, if you want to come up to the microphone and ask your question, by all means. And because we have a 20-minute limitation, I would ask if you guys could just ask your question of one of the panelists, because it looks like that's what it's for ComEd. And so if that's a question, yeah, use the other one, man. Try to be respectful that we have 15 other people that want to ask a question. So thank you, Nicholas.
So it sounds like it's not set in stone, which is great. I'm a hard no on the data center. I think the thing is, where is the rush? We have a lot of questions. Possible no sound energy generation. instead of Lockport being a guinea pig, if they're going to build it across the country, why not just wait till it's all worked out? And like you said, there is no rush, which is great, but I don't think we should do it right now, if ever.
Thank you, Nicholas. I appreciate that insight. Thank you. Okay. Next is Chris Latta.
Hey, thanks. I had a white paper question, and I don't think that you answered it completely, about returning some of the money that, any of the profits that are made from the data center back to the public in some form of like tax break, maybe a tax freeze on property taxes. This looks like everybody agrees that maybe it should go to schools too. Can you commit to that today, that if the data center happens, that that's where that money will go?
Again, we are not committed to anything. And so whatever we think is best for the community based on whatever input we work with, 100%, we would try to find a way to make it work for the community. So
you're saying yes?
I'm saying yes. We would need to find a way to make it work for the community. That's the whole point of these workshops.
That's not the question. Now, the question is about taxes and going to schools. Those two things.
So again, we already had conversations about how we can make it work for schools. That was just preliminary conversations we've had as a council. I think it is something we want to pursue. I don't necessarily know that I can make it happen in the sense that school districts right now get funded separately from us. We're not responsible for school districts, and so it's kind of a nice thing to think about, and we could pursue it, but it would have to be outside of the normal taxing body, which I believe is quite doable, but it would be unique. And so I would have to tell you, I'd be committed to the process to see if we could find a way to make it work. But it actually is important to us. It pains us all that, like, I've got landlocked schools that don't have the same resources that other school districts have, and they all come to the same school, and you have a disparity. That is problematic for us.
Okay.
And if there's a way that we can make this work for your data center, we would.
Okay. So just one more thing. There doesn't seem to be a list in these presentations of the clear benefits. Like, there's a lot of questions and things like that, unknowns, and like some of the things we do know. Could you come to the next workshop with some clear benefits of like, these are the things that are going to help? Like when we're talking about, redoing downtown, looks great. And I can walk into one of those places and I can benefit from that. I can't walk into the data center and benefit from that.
Yeah, 100%, man.
So that would be good to see. I think that would put some people at ease too.
No, it actually was a lot of what the second workshop is about, so thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate it, Chris. Is Chris Pearson here? Or Catherine, I'm so sorry. Catherine Pierce?
Hi, so I grew up my whole life in Lockport, was in the city for a few years, currently I'm back. And I've seen the massive changes that have happened in the city since I've left. There's so many more places of business. It just seems much more lively than the small little town that I grew up in. And I just don't understand how a data center could be adding to the vibe that you are trying to create for Lockport. The very, very false equivalency of downtown being rehabbed and it's now for the people versus this very anti-human agency in the middle of our town. It just doesn't make any sense to me. You yourself said no one needs another data center. So why are we even entertaining the idea of this little town that could, and stick it to the man and make them bend to our will when we could just tell them to go F off and not build in our town?
Catherine, I agree. I know some of us here have been working on this property for over 20 years. The first time I ever came to a city council meeting was actually working with CARE. There was an intermodal that Chevron was looking to sell this property to, a big rail yard, and I came to a city council and I said, guys, that's not going to work. That'll totally transform what our city is. We'll be known as the intermodal, right? It's 180 acres, is larger than our whole downtown. So Kevin, I need you to understand, I understand what you're talking about. I've been working on this for 26 years. And the reason we own this property is because it went up for auction, right? Chevron totally threw out everything we'd worked on as a citizens advisory panel. And Sandy and Randy and some of the people from CARE know what I'm talking about. For 20 years, or I'd say for 12 years, we worked with Chevron on a citizens advisory panel about what this business park was going to look like. They still owned the property at the time. And we went through all this process of like, oh, they let us name the business park. We're going to call it Star Business Park. It was going to be a light industrial piece. We picked out the lighting, what the building's going to look like. It was all great. Until Chevron pulled the rug out and said, we're just going to put it up for auction. That was, what the heck have we been doing for 12 years, having all these community workshops? And this is where we don't want to do the same thing. And so the only reason we own it, because it was sold to a logistics company that wanted about 100,000 trucks down there, is because I got on the phone and said, are you kidding me? If you were going to sell it to a logistics company for $1.5 million, that's what the gavel came down on, we would have purchased that anytime you told us that. So we actually yanked it back from that auction and were able to purchase it because we kind of made Chevron feel so bad about letting it go to almost go to a logistics company. I can't tell you how important this piece of property is for all the years that I've worked on it, people like CARE have worked on it, people on the Citizens Advisory Panel worked on it. I get it. It's important. And so for all the kind of, stuff that's been going on out there, like, oh, these guys have already been bought and paid for, none of it's true. We've been trying to have a conversation about, can we leverage this for the benefit of the town? If we can, great. Can we make it work for humans? Can it be used to build out the Star Commons where we kind of do Old Canal Days? Can it be a full festival field, kind of like think of a World's Fair where it actually has a campus there where we can actually have some of that adaptable training we talked about with Lewis and Joliet, while at the same time doing all those things. It could. Doesn't mean if we're going to do something, it has to be for humans. And I agree 110%. And if it can't be done, then we don't do it. And that's what we're here to tell you.
What I will say then is all that effort and time going into acquiring that property, it would be a real shame to see it go to something that is such a waste like a data center.
Yes. If it doesn't work for our community, then it doesn't work. All right. I think it's Ira Mays or Hayes? Forgive me. I'm so sorry.
All right, hello, my name is Aaron. None of my concerns were addressed at all in the panel. I don't want the data center. I've been following the news as much as I can with data centers across the country. My concern is if this is put in, which I do not want, eventually the water in our towns, because it's not going to just affect Lockport, it'll affect Homer Glen and the surrounding areas as well, will become undrinkable out of the faucet. It does not matter what cooling system you're using or whatever, because eventually that water becomes unusable. It becomes toxic sludge filled with heavy metals, and then it goes back out of the data center. It gets soaked up by the groundwater. Who is keeping track of where that is going? It comes out of faucets. If you look up online, More Perfect Union is covering it. These towns around the data centers, you turn on the faucet, it comes out yellow, it comes out brown. You cannot drink it, you cannot shower in it. No.
I guess, Rachel, can you speak to that at all? Because you're kind of our water expert.
We are seeing a scenario like that in Memphis with the XAI mega data center. The community around there is on groundwater, and that's a case, my understanding what's going on in Memphis is that the XAI hyperscale is draining so much from the groundwater that when the residents who have been there for decades go to turn on their water, it's this scenario. So that draining possibility can happen when a data center is allowed on the wells or on the groundwater. The second thing you brought up is another issue, actually. The mayor put me on my homework here because one of the recommendations to use less water is doing these closed loop systems where they cycle the same water many times. That usually occurs with some kind of chemical additives, including...
And then that water would be unusable forever.
Yeah.
So
right.
we would be dumping water into nothing.
Yeah. I mean, so what happens in that case, right, is that the closed loop cycle, it's more water efficient, but chemicals are added. Over time, those chemicals accrue. What seems to happen, and I've been looking into this since I got my assignment, it's a good student, right?
Yes, you're doing well, thank you.
Is that most of that blowdown, it's called, the waste of the data center, goes into municipal sewers. So then you've got the municipal sewers receiving that waste. Now, you could certainly say, I don't want those things going into my sewers. You can also say, and it gets back to some of the questions people were raising about oversight and regulation, but it seems really important that those chemicals, in the cases where they are discharged, where there is a data center, that those be treated and stored by the data center itself. So this is to say your fears do correlate with what's going on, and that those are like two tracks of concern about the kind of contaminants involved in data center cooling.
So Rachel, let me ask you a follow-up question on it. So it sounds like the sludge piece happens if, it's not because of water that the data center is using and goes back to an aquifer that people are drinking. It's that the aquifer is getting drained and so it's getting low. That's where the problems come in.
So that's the one that's going on in Memphis.
And again, if we were to do something, we'd say, you can't use our potable water anyway, you have to use our effluent.
But it would also, and this was after we talked and you asked me this, I mean, this is my best couple days of research and I'm happy to do more. But the other issue is, especially in closed loop systems, not the municipal system, but closed loop systems, to make that cooling really efficient, they're adding nitrates, they're adding PFAS, we also call forever chemicals. And then that, at some point, gets discharged into the municipal sewers. So then that ends up at your municipal wastewater plant, and that's a whole other kind of set of issues, because then we've got unregulated.
Let me follow up with two questions on that. Is one, to your best of your knowledge, are the basically these are big heat exchangers. I mean, I was in the Navy for 4 years and it's like, okay, it's a heat exchanger. Is the heat exchangers used in cooling of data centers different than like if we had a soybean processing plant? I mean, are they different? And then secondly, if they are, do you, and I know this isn't your expertise is water coming out, not discharge, so I know we're kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, but are these kind of things fully mitigatable? Can you, instead of it being externalized, can an industry say, no, nothing leaves that site without it being fully mitigated? Are those things possible?
I think it's possible, but we're in a bit of a bind from a regulation point of view, because we just had the forever chemicals we worked so hard to get listed as contaminants delisted. So that's difficult without a federal EPA behind one. We can work on the state level, and I think it's worth looking at. But the point is, like, when those contaminants come into play more with a data center than with another factory is in that process of cooling, right? Trying to get the most cooling out of the least amount of water comes with these additives. And then, so these are like, forever chemicals. We're not only getting those from data centers, unfortunately, and nitrates, we're not only getting those from data centers, but this can, depending on the cooling system, this can enter into the effluent stream in concentrate.
All right, I got you. And maybe thank you, Aaron. These are great.
Yeah,
and so
I
but I have one more
think it's the risk of that being leached into our groundwater.
Oh, sure. But one more follow-up with Mira on that, and that is But you know what, it's okay. I lost my train of thought anyway. Let's go to the next question. People want to hear from people. So Mark Stewart, right here.
Thank you very much. That was my best, Vinny. I had a bunch of things I wanted to say, and then I sat here and I listened. And I've heard a lot of things my whole life. Gaslighting would be a good one. I've heard a lot of gaslighting. I know what gaslighting is when I hear it. No offense, there's a politician in the room, they gaslight. They want a plan, they want a win. They want to win. They want to win for their community, but most of all, they want to get reelected. Okay? So, let's back up here. What does AI want? What do these companies want? What is their ultimate product they look to develop? Do you think it's data centers? Can I get a show of hands? Do you think they really want to build data centers for the sake of data? Let me see a show of hands. No, none of you think that. Why? What do you think they really want? Listen, AI is on track to build a sentient box. The only word once used was by our educator here. He said it in his introduction. He said, I know you're conscious. And I'm not even going to get into the details. That is the hook. That is the hook. They want to create a conscious box. And they don't want to pay for the research that goes into a so-called conscious box. Let that just rest right there. They don't want to pay for the research to build their product. Moving on.
Mark,
Federico, excuse me,
for the panel,
excuse me,
man.
my time.
A lot of what you're doing,
excuse me, my time,
is speculation.
Excuse me, my time.
We have 20 minutes.
Excuse me, my time.
And you're actually.
Excuse me, my time.
You have.
Excuse me, my time.
When you
excuse me, my time. I heard you gaslight enough. Now I'm going to talk.
Actually,
I'm going to
Mark,
talk now.
Your time is up. I wish you'd have respect for all these other folks.
Hey, wait a minute.
That also want to talk.
Wait just
they have
a minute.
time and they're due their time as
wait
well.
You cut me off in midstream. You're going to talk about my content. I'm going to talk about your content. You're going to cut me off. I'll leave. Fine. I'm not here to stay where I'm not wanted. But if you don't want to hear the truth about what's going on.
Your feedback is wanted, Mark, but I want you to try to ask with something that's germane to these panelists for today. And if it's not, then we can continue this conversation. I appreciate that. And actually, Mark, I would actually love to just meet with you personally and have the conversation. Because I actually don't disagree with you on the end game.
No,
they are looking for AGI.
Then you gotta let me finish.
The big tech industry is racing towards that, and it is problematic. But in the end, that one's bigger than today's topic. So if we can,
we can discuss that another time. I'm not asking any questions. I'm here to talk. I'm here for a statement. I was given 5. I was given 5. Can I reclaim my time, folks?
I guess we can do it this way. So the rest of you folks want to give up your time for Mark, and that's perfectly fine. But we can make Mark the last speaker.
You don't want me?
So if because we can.
I got no problem. Hey, if the room doesn't want me to continue, I won't continue.
Actually, hey. All right. And Mark, your comments are actually important to me, and so I would appreciate getting together. All right. No. All right. So. All right, everybody. And I understand, dude. I get the passion about it, man. Jane Anderson, do you have a question? Please come on up.
My original question was going to be on water, but you've pretty much covered that with a few things that should be worked out. So, my next question is, what about the health consequences, particularly to the neighborhood that this thing is in? Now,
Agreed, Jan. It's like, we didn't actually get to noise mitigation, we didn't get to vibration sounds, all that stuff. That's what I said when we talked about in the beginning, the 5 big topics, kind of environmental impacts is huge. Not just water, but it's like sound, vibration, all those things are essential. And I guess one other thing too, I think, and again, I'm not selling on data centers, but there's many different kinds of data centers. Everything that we seem to be having the most concern about and most anxiety about are hyperscale data centers, kind of that large 1.8 gigawatt level thing that we saw in Joliet. Nothing like that would ever even fit here anyway. And is there, as we go through this conversation, there's still the need for those smaller edge compute data centers like we're all using right now with our phones. Is that kind of level of a data center, which was originally given, an acceptable use by our committee of citizens, is that still something, or we've just gotten to a point where none of it works, which is fine too. But those don't have the same sound and mitigation issues that these large hyperscales do. It's kind of like, again, when you go back to the railroad, we all like a train station when the railroad came through. We all like getting on the train, but that doesn't mean we have to accept an intermodal rail yard and a giant roundhouse. Those are totally different infrastructure pieces, but for the same industry. And so there's some pieces that could work, and there's some pieces that might not work. But whatever happens, it has to be, I can't tell you what it is because we haven't gotten that far. And so, no, it's not hyperscale. They've asked for a big allotment, which doesn't mean that it can happen. It's just that all these industries, like I think we heard earlier from one of the panelists, they try to get the biggest allotment they can and then go sell it. But it doesn't mean that we have to agree to any of those kinds of things. We can actually make the demands and say, if we were to do it, this is the kind of data center that you could do. These are the kind of things that are unacceptable. Whatever they are, they can't have mitigation issues that leave the site. And that we've all agreed, even as a council, in just the small discussions
are
we've
there
had.
any issues with cancer from those data centers?
You guys can all say yes. Why don't we have our medical staff up here?
Those are questions, right, so that we can, I think, do our best to find out answers for. So thank you.
I have a little bit of history with that piece of property. My great-grandparents owned it before it was sold to Texaco.
Are you the Daggett?
My great-grandfather had a sulky racetrack, and he had a racehorse on that property.
But it was the Daggett family, yes?
I don't know what he called it.
No, that was the family name. The Daggetts owned that property.
No,
so.
the Roddy girls owned it. Maybe the Daggetts owned part of it.
The Daggetts, the Daggetts owned it when they sold it to
the Roddy girls did own it
to Texaco in 1912. So, but it's okay. However it works.
Actually,
it's a big piece of property.
My grandmother sold it to Texaco.
It's a large piece of property. But anyways,
yeah.
well, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
But if there's, I want to try to get to some other questions too.
Yeah, go ahead.
But thank you for the questions about mitigation.
But I am concerned about the health issue.
No, it's an important piece of this. All right, Reagan Hayes.
Hello. I had a statement prepared, but after listening, it changed a little bit. So what I really want to know is, I've done a lot of research on AI, obviously. I'm the generation that's going to have to bear the weight of this. My generation is being left a ruin of a planet, and we're being told that it's our fault. But we don't want this. What about, I know you have children, what about your children's children? Don't you worry about that? And my other question is, I've been doing a lot of research about this because I care a lot. And something that the data centers do is something that we see in a lot of industries. They find out ways to skirt tax law and zoning laws. And a way that they do that is they don't register as industrial. They register as commercial, which gives them the right to our drinking water. Now, you can say that we own the property and we can demand all of this, but you're not above zoning laws. If they register as commercial and get access to our drinking water, what happens then?
Well, actually, because we own it, does give us a lot of control. I hear your concerns. It actually is one of the unique pieces of this that's unlike many other, municipalities, is that we can make extraordinary demands because we own it. But I hear your thoughts. And when it comes to the AI thing, look, man, I agree with you. If I could press a button and take us back to 1980s technology where we just made fun of people.
You can do that, though. You can do that right now.
Everybody,
for our community. You can do that.
Everybody who's carrying these around has accepted the technology, Rachel. That's the rub we're having. And we can say no. We can say no tomorrow. The problem is,
You should have
it's
said
not
no
going to stop the
yesterday.
industry.
You should have already said no.
The problem is, you're still going to face this industry getting built out across the country. And that is the biggest struggle we have. That's fine.
If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
We're actually trying to make... And I guess there's kind of two pieces to that. Is saying no here today, or whatever, we do this, stop AI, or as part of the solution, trying to take this industry, which has just been externalizing costs for the last number of years as AI has come up, and instead stop it from externalizing costs and make it do full mitigations. It's really the crux of this whole question, is that can we do that? Well, when we own it, we can make extraordinary demands. But it's not going to happen otherwise. Next question is from Tracy Panapinto.
Hi. I appreciate this opportunity. Before I make my statement, I had a question. When was the LOI signed?
I'd say, what did we do this about 7 months ago?
Okay.
Only if we choose to. And it expires July 1st. And it means nothing. All it meant was we wouldn't sell the property while they did their due diligence. That's all it means. There's no other things to it.
How much do you want for the property?
That's all negotiable. We haven't even discussed that because we are so far before any of those kind of questions.
How much do you want for the property?
I don't have an answer for you, Marcus. We haven't even talked about it as a council yet. We came to the community with this discussion before we ended up even getting into the process of negotiation.
My statement is that this is a hard no. You talk about the water, but I am on a well. I don't have the luxury of my water being purified by the city. I already have an extensive 4-part water treatment in my home. It's already expensive. I don't want my water more messed up. I don't want to hear the noise. I live on High Road. I would hear anything that goes on in the Star Business Park. And most importantly, you've said that you have, since Lockport owns the property and in representation of Lockport, you can make demands. But we both know that is not how negotiations work. There are 2 parties involved, and they each want something, and there will be compromise on both sides. I don't think that we should even step into this quagmire.
Okay. Thank you. Rich, where did Sandy go? Oh, there she is. Sandy, come on up.
As Steve said, I do want to thank Steve for one thing, for purchasing behind Chevron Texaco. My name is Sandy Brzezinski. I've worked with CARE for 30 years on that property. In the cleanup, the attempted cleanup of that property. CARE for that many years has worked diligently and continues to work because we want that to stay clean, and I use that term clean loosely, because it's to a certain, standard. CARE worked and wanted it to a higher standard. But we do have to thank Steve because they were literally bringing in a trucking company. But it was through CARE's diligence for the last 30 years that it was even there to be able for the city to purchase. I just want to get that straight.
Thank you, sir.
I do have a couple statements to read, but they had a card that you had to sign, and or you had to circle, and I circled the data center.
It's okay, Sandy, ask your question,
but
whatever you
I wanted to just label, I know there's limited time, I wanted to label, tell you the concerns, and the concerns basically, not only for CARE, but for myself personally. Massive water consumption. A lot of these have already been brought up. Utility costs increasing, loud 24/7 noise, potential waste, environmental issues such as PFAS and toxic chemicals, health concerns. The other thing I wanted to ask before I read my prepared statements, if anybody has been online to look at Erin Brockovich, she has done a map, and any of you guys, to show how these data centers are basically taking over this entire United States. The other thing, I do want to read my statements, but I do want to ask a question first. And I believe it was to the Citizens Utility. I thought it was, somebody brought it up. What I want to ask is, I believe you said ComEd has signed contracts for large loads. I believe that's what was stated. Are you guys aware, you probably are aware, what has occurred in Lake Tahoe? And why I ask this is because in Lake Tahoe, what happened is, what they're developing in Nevada, the data company has come in, taken all the water, and so the water that was for years supplied to Lake Tahoe is now being taken by the data company, and Lake Tahoe has to find another source for where they're going to get their water. I would like to ask, could this possibly happen here?
Like the water coming from, like, our aquifer or from, like?
From the grid, from Commonwealth, from ComEd.
All right, so please.
Could we lose, when you said that these big data companies come in because they have a lot of money. So they sign big contracts for large loads. They're going to be pulling all this energy. Could we be losing our energy to the point where we're in a situation such as Lake Tahoe?
I got you.
She meant energy instead of water.
Sorry, I hear you. Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah, I've read like 2 news articles about the Lake Tahoe situation. I believe that the arrangement for the supply of electric service to Lake Tahoe was always contingent, like it wasn't actually like a permanent utility was in charge of Lake Tahoe. So I don't think that specific thing could happen to ComEd, but what I described earlier this evening about, data centers driving, like exacerbating the supply-demand crunch when it comes to energy availability is already happening.
Okay. I'll just quickly try to read my prepared statements. I love this town. I've lived in this town my entire life. I live on the west side. I don't know if any of you are familiar, underneath by the old bridge, the little older neighborhood down there. I've lived there and I've been married over 50 years. And I've lived down from the site that I've worked on the old Texaco. And so many of the relatives work there, including my husband. But let me read this. As a lifelong resident and someone who attended the meetings of the Star Innovation District Master Plan, I never thought it would lead here. Although probably in the minority at those meetings, my hope was that the land would remain as open land. I would like to make a recommendation. Since we seem to have so many residents interested in this site, at the municipal level, I would love to see the Star Innovation District Master Plan reopened along with zoning for that site. I know in the Facebook post dated May 6th about the workshops, our mayor said, and I quote, "But I hope people at least understand that this discussion is coming from concern, that we either get rolled by an industry bent on disruption or find a way to make it work for us. Personally, I find it sad that the idea of a false dilemma would lead us to this point. Yes, a false dilemma. It's like saying we're standing on tracks with a train coming, and we can either get run over or climb aboard the train. Those aren't the only options. Get off the tracks. Just like getting rolled by an industry or, quote, making it work for us aren't our only options here. People often bring up jobs with something like this type of development. I think for this development, I think it's hypocritical to talk about bringing jobs, temporary at that will build a facility that could potentially put people out of jobs. Temporary jobs should never be more important than the residents' quality of life, health, and for many, their biggest investment, their home and their property. I will end this with myself as a resident for a lifetime, and on the West Side for 50 years. As a director in care, we oppose this as it stands, especially without regulations, but I would bring back to jobs. If you want jobs, and I bring this to any elected officials in here and everybody, if you want jobs, build a second bridge. Put some of this energy into that.
Thank you, Sandy. And you know, Sandy, we've worked together for a long time on this stuff together. I appreciate your words about acknowledging that the only reason we have control over this property at all is because we were aggressive to buy it in the first place. And, you know, when it comes to things like the bridge, I get it. You know that we don't have control over the bridge. You know that it's a state route. You know that we've worked hard with the county.
The politicians got to stop flapping about everything, and now data centers. Lockport needs another bridge.
I don't disagree with you. And trying to work with the county executive on these things is actually where it has to happen. So I can't build a bridge on a state road, but I hear you and I understand the problems with that. All right. Ray, you got some comments?
So, my name's Ray Alcala. I'm a longtime resident. I've been currently living on State Street for 35 years, and I lived here before. I'm very concerned because 2nd Street is about a 5-minute walk from my house. And when we had Texaco, if you guys remember years ago, there was an explosion. Our front windows broke out when I lived on Smith Road. But having a data center or having a trucking company or having another intermodal train terminal or trucking terminal isn't what we need. You know, I heard some comments about an arts and entertainment center. I heard comments about education, training. I think there's many other options for that large piece of property, you know, and using it maybe as a World's Fair permanent Canal Days, you know, theme park, whatever. But if we have all these other ideas, maybe we should start having more community talk about the center, the Star Center, and what we could do with it, and just kind of shelve this data center thing until we get some more ideas. I think the workshops are a great idea, and we're going to have time to talk about stuff, but instead of investigating and talking about how we could fight this corporation, why don't we fight for something better, for education, for the schools in the district, you know? Maybe our electric bill. So I have a question for the Citizens Utility representative. Over a year ago, I heard that the shareholders of Commonwealth Edison were going to get a 12% increase. And coincidentally, they requested a 12% raise in the delivery fees. So we know who's paying the shareholders, that's all they care about. They don't care about us. They just care about making money. It's all about money, And I'm sorry, I can't go to the S&P 500 or anywhere, New York Stock Exchange, and say, oh, excuse me, I'm not making enough money. I would like to make 20% this year instead of 8%. It doesn't work that way. That isn't how it should be done. And unfortunately, they have us over a barrel. They tell you, well, we allowed you to choose your system. Okay, I'm going to tell you about the system. I had a property in Romeoville between the Des Plaines River. It's a beat-up old silver building. It's right across from Citgo, and it's right next to the Next Gen. When I bought it, they had 4 years to clean up the old Next Generation plant. So I figured I had 4 years to fix my building. Well, Romeoville, 90 days after I bought the building, gave me 14 violations after I had applied for a FOIA, and they had told me that there were no violations on the property. But that's another story. But I'm just going to say how what you perceive and what you're told is not always what the truth is. And I had to sell that property back to Romeoville, and now they're supposed to make it open space because there's 7 acres of forest preserve land. But my bill went from $28 for my, $32 for my total bill to $28 for all my charges, my supply charge and delivery charge. I had a bill with no kilowatts, and my bill was still $32. I got a $32 bill with my taxes with no usage. I turned off my power, and I still got a bill. So I don't understand how you can be paying, twice as much money for your electric, and you're not even using any kilowatts. So if you could address the kilowatt part.
Let's talk.
Yeah. Okay.
No, this is my life, and it's an uphill battle. We'll talk.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like a very personal comment question. So yes, maybe Rachel or Sarah can help you with that.
I go to all the car shows. I'm there every Monday, and I want to thank you for what has been done in the downtown area, and that is something that we should be proud of, because other communities like Plainfield and St. Charles, they've always concentrated on building up their neighborhood. And we had 7 thrift stores at one time in downtown Lockport, besides the burned out buildings. And now we have a decent area where we can take our friends and our family, and people that come to my house want to go to Lockport. So, I want to thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, Ray, and it's really about a good cooperative council and a good staff, so it's a team effort, but thank you for that. Mr. Balich.
Well, I want to start off and let everybody know, I don't live in Lockport. I live in Homer Glen. But we're going to get screwed the same as the people in Lockport if this happens. There's no doubt in my mind. And I'm going to tell you something else. There's no reason why there's not a referendum. The state of Texas and the state of Missouri and a couple other states are banning these data centers permanently. Ohio just passed that they have to go to referendum for the state to ban the data centers. Lockport really should be going to referendum. And I'll tell you one of the things that really gets on my nerves, because I got a water bill like you wouldn't believe. I have 3 people in my house, and it goes somewhere between $260 and $300
Are you on American Water, or are you on
American Water?
But dude, that has nothing to do with
Yeah, but it does, because we were told when they got American Water, they don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. You're going to have good water, and you're not going to have to pay much more than you already got.
Steve, that's
going to happen again, because
that's
why?
That's a rate you do at Homer's Glen.
These mega giants lie.
Thank you, Steve. Brent?
Now they want to merge with Aqua. Yeah.
I want to thank everybody for sitting out here for almost 3 hours. Give yourself a hand. A few things. So 25 years I've been here. I've been through a lot of different councils and mayors. I do applaud you for your downtown reconstruction and rehab. That was a great thing for local business and local residents. And obviously, this is not for either. And we should start pounding our chests against this, because this is not rolling across the country as easily as people think. 7 out of 10 Americans, and this is a recent Gallup poll, this is from the Aaron Brockovich site, thank you. 7 out of 10 Americans oppose data centers being built in their communities. There's 70 communities across the country that have blocked data centers, and 3 of our neighbors are included from what I've read: Plainfield, Oswego, and Lisle. Naperville voted one down last year as well. So I would ask maybe, Steve, if you could reach out to them to see what decision matrix they went through for that. A couple other things. I don't think we're there yet with a water source. I don't think we're there yet with water discharge methodology. I don't think we're there yet with the power source. I don't think we're there with any kind of noise mitigation. I don't think we're there with any health problems mitigation. So, you know, I don't think we need to go much further. We have a month to make up our minds. Problem is, a lot of the people in here only have had a few weeks to research this, and we're just at the tip of the iceberg here. You know, Steve, you've been at it for, I think, 8 months, you said. Good for, that's good for you, but we got to make up our minds here in the next few weeks with what we're going to say. Another thing, too, we talked about the infrastructure capacities and challenges in Lockport, and I know in the last 4 or 5 years since COVID, we've had 5 or 6 new subdivisions with, I think, in excess of 3,000 new housing units. That's putting a strain already on our water, our sewer, our power. And, you know, that's enough. I don't think we need to go further than that. We're on a wild goose chase here with trying to keep making sure that the infrastructure is going to somehow recover for this data center. It's not gonna. The only other thing I wanted to bring up was there's been lots of referendums for lots of different things in Lockport since I've been here for 25 years. Since the land is owned by the city and the taxpayers, from what I know, have you considered putting this to a vote of the residents rather than the 8-person council? Thank you.
Thanks, Brent, I appreciate it. All right, yeah, Robbie Michael and Ben Youssef. I don't know if that's one big long name or 2 people.
My name is Rabbi Michael Ben Yosef, human rights activist in Chicago. I'm not a resident of Lockport. I came here from Chicago to stand with the citizens of Lockport. You might ask, why do I care? And why does this meeting have a relevance for me being here? Mayor, I need to ask you a question. How much are you being paid? Seems like you abandon your own citizens. Mayor, I listen to you spend this, all this money is not good money. You are contributing to a humanitarian crisis. This is not okay. In all due respect, Mayor, I sat here listening to you spoon-feeding these people with a bunch of BS. You sound like a typical politician that trades human beings to pander to billionaires, that cares less about human lives. Instead of data centers, bring something to the community that helps the community. Bring in community centers, health centers, social service centers. To the citizens of Lockport, I implore you, vote him out. I'm here to stand with the citizens of Lockport to say no to data centers. I live in the south side of Chicago, and there is much pushing for data centers on the south side and even on the west side of Chicago. Research indicates that data centers are disproportionately located in communities with high social vulnerabilities, poverty rates, and existing environmental burdens. Let this be clear. These billionaires are not putting these data centers up north on upper neighborhoods. They are putting these data centers in poor, disvested neighborhoods on the south side and the west side of Chicago where the poor lives. They want to put these data centers to use us, the people of color, as a guinea pig to bring forth this racism in our communities. Over 10 million people rely on the Lake Michigan for their drinking water, the largest public drinking water supply in Illinois, serving around 6.6 million residents in Chicago. Just think as how many people will be affected here in Lockport.
Robbie,
this is immoral, this is immoral and unethical, just pure greed.
I have a couple residents.
These data centers must end. God
Thank you,
bless.
Robbie. Appreciate it. Matt Long, are you here? Matt, are you around? Oh, thank you.
So I don't really have a question because so much of it is speculative, and there, I could ask a question. A lot of people ask questions, and you're going to hear the answer that you want to hear from those billionaires, from the data companies. They're going to tell you what you want to hear. It's going to be lies. It's going to be smoke and mirrors. They're going to tell you one thing and do another, and that has happened over time, and it's happened from corporation and industry on this planet and in this country over time. And they've done it on the backs of the people who can't afford to fight for themselves. So what I would say is a lot of things that have already been said. That's my daughter. We've heard from other young people, like this will affect generations to come. This will not be in isolation. And it wasn't that long ago that the Cuyahoga River was on fire, and we said that we need new clean water laws, and same with things with the Clean Air Act. All of these things happened because of the abuse of the water, the land, and the air. And these companies are not going to do anything other than what they've already done and what they already do. The last thing I'll say is I have a sister-in-law who battled cancer, leukemia, after a spill in Downers Grove where she lived, and she got a big settlement from that. But that's just a drop in the bucket for them. They'll pay a fine, they'll pay a fee, they'll pay you to make you go away. I heard somebody talk about Perfect Union. Check it out. They're talking about data centers all the time. 60 Minutes has done things on them. In different states, that data center, we already heard it, those diesel generators are running around the clock at night, and then those companies tell you they're not, and then they send up drones that are taking that footage, and that footage is giving them infrared, and they can see all of those different diesel generators running at night, even though the companies say they're not. The last thing I'll say is I also know a family in Lamont, and that little girl is also currently battling leukemia. My daughter turns 5 here at the beginning of the next month, and that little girl is a year older than my daughter, and there will be nothing that happens in isolation. You can't drink money, you can't eat money, you can't breathe money.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Christine Flynn.
Hi, I am a resident of Lockport. I'm also the Director of Clean Energy at the Workforce Policy Lab out of Northern Illinois University. I was so glad that jobs came up because that is something we're hearing a lot from data centers. They kind of sell communities that we're bringing in thousands of jobs. Oftentimes we're seeing temporary jobs at construction, and then during operation and maintenance, they drastically fall off. I think that the STAR Innovation District would be a fantastic place for workforce development. It sounds like you're already working with JJC as well as Lewis. Both of those are recipients of Climate and Equitable Job Act funding, and it would be phenomenal if we could use the Innovation District as a workforce hub, not necessarily for AI reskilling, because I think that there's not significant jobs, although I know IBM is bringing 700. That's kind of a drop in the bucket when it comes to how many jobs we need. But we know that we're likely looking at needing about 150,000 jobs by 2050 to reach our goals that are set out by CEJA. So if we could repurpose the Innovation District to push forward decarbonization jobs, energy efficiency jobs, things that we need right now that will make a real impact on the energy bills of everyone in this room, that would be a phenomenal use for that district, and I would highly support that.
Thank you, Christine. Well, that's the end of our open comments, and so, as I mentioned to you earlier, if you guys have cards and comments you want to put in, please fill them out, and we'll have kind of a running commentary and Q&A. And, you know, just go off of Christina's comments about repurposing the STAR Innovation District for education and all those other aspects that you mentioned. We don't have to repurpose it. It's already set up that way. It's exactly what it was set up for in the first place. And when we had this, I'm all for the education. This was one piece of like, can we leverage the funding from this to pay for it? Because it has to get paid for somehow. That was really the question that we wanted to have this conversation. And one of the things that also was important for the council to want to have workshops was this very reason. As I mentioned to you earlier, we worked with Chevron for 12 years on a citizens advisory panel, only to have it mean nothing. And that was like nothing worse than going to workshops where you feel like your voice was just for a dog and pony show. And we didn't want to do that as a council to our people. We went through a process where the community came in and we looked at what we wanted to do on that property 5 years ago. And we didn't want to just say, you know what, I don't care what you said 5 years ago, we're going to throw that out the window. We didn't want to do that to our community. So we wanted to come in here and have these conversations together. And again, like I said in the beginning, I get that it's volatile. I get that that fourth piece that we talked about, like AI, it is something that's transformational and that is concerning. I get it. I appreciate you coming out here. It's actually one of the things I actually like about Lockport is that it actually is a passionate community. Unlike some other communities that I've seen, our residents do come out and speak about what's on their mind. And so council and I have always appreciated it. It's why we actually love this town, my wife and I. So I appreciate you coming out here today and understand there's nothing to be voted on. There's nothing to be decided because there is actually no development deal at all. This was us coming to you, just like we did 5 years ago, to talk about this. It's not that there's anything that has to be an up or down or not. It's just a conversation. And I do appreciate you all coming out and sharing those things with us. Good night. I want to thank our panelists for coming out. Thank you for coming all the way out here. So thank you very much.